All right, what's going on, folks? Ordinary Income back. I took a couple days off. Things have been pretty hectic at work. Had to get a few things done, so I apologize for not making any videos. In the meantime, I was digging up some topics, things that might be not too crazy. I know there was a lot of news, a lot of things going on in the markets, but I figured I'd pick a topic that definitely was interesting regarding the ripples it had on a few things. And the topic was that we saw a couple days ago, almost a week ago, that Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin said that he's going to be taking away every Russian stock that trades on an international market. Now, Russia has its own stock market, the MOEX, Moscow Open Exchange, or something like that. But just like how America has the NYSE, Russia has its exchange, the MOEX, which is pretty much the NYSE for Russia, where they list companies off of their exchange. Why would they list them in their own exchange? There's different rules each exchange has. If you're listing in the NYSE, the rules, the accounting, the financials, the auditing, and all that is going to be different than the rules you'd have on the Hong Kong exchange or any other one. Every exchange is dictated by their own country's policies, their own kind of government agencies' policies. But it makes sense for if you're a Russian company that you prefer to list on the Russian exchange first, because that's where your operations are. That's not necessarily the point, but I figured I'd give a primer on that. But the idea is he's saying for every company that's listed on an overseas exchange, those shares pretty much won't exist. We're removing them from that exchange. Now in America, you can buy Russian stocks, but it will be on the OTC, which are the over-the-counter markets, which is pretty much like the market in order to buy companies that aren't listed, formally listed in America, but you still want to have a share of it in US dollars, so to say. There's a couple of Chinese names that do that are popular. There's a couple, obviously Russian names, but you could have Mexican names, Brazilian names, all that sorts. They could just be listed on a different exchange, and you want, as an American, to be able to purchase that without having to make an account there. You can go in the OTC market. Most Russian companies are OTCs. They're a little bit trickier because they don't trade as easily as companies that are American listed. For example, if you're trying to purchase Apple, you could always get filled at any price you pretty much want in that range. For Russian stocks, it's a little bit harder. There's not as much liquidity in OTC markets. So if you purchase something, you might be having to give up a couple cents or maybe even $1 or so from what it is, because it's hard just to get that quote when you're using a broker like TD or Interactive Brokers. I would definitely say speak to your financial advisor. This is not a recommendation to purchase or sell any securities. Definitely talk to someone who knows it, who can give you a better analysis than me doing it in about 5 to 10 minutes. But the point is, Putin's saying all those OTC markets, we're taking them off. Now, America and England for sure have already halted purchasing and selling of any shares. But if you're someone who's holding these shares prior to those halts, this definitely impacts you, because in return, Putin says you're going to get those shares on Russian-only brokerage accounts, so to say. So if you have an account with a broker who deals with the MOEX directly, you will get your share. Dividends are going to be pretty much done for anyone who's an international purchaser. And if you do not have an account that deals directly with the MOEX, for the most part in America, for investors like you and me, the common person, you are SOL, which means pretty much like so out of luck, in that it's going to be real difficult for you to obtain your shares. Now again, if you've been holding Russian shares, something like the RSX, Lukoil, Gazprom, prior to this, they're still in your account right now. I would definitely talk to your financial advisor to see how it's going to work out, because it is a little complicated. Why does it matter? What is pretty interesting about this? Well, what I noticed is that it's not just individuals who are owning Russian stocks. First of all, we've had a lot of big banks, and I can pull it up. Like, banks have definitely been intervening in the Russian market and purchasing their credits. Let's go Russian bonds or something like that. Yeah, I remember seeing that Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, they were, the moment that Russian stocks were banned, they were still doing credit swaps and swap lines and all that with the Russian banks and Russian credit. Not necessarily saying that this is going to be impacting them, but it's something interesting to note that when America was pretty much saying don't touch these things are off limits, and you might have something happen that Putin just did happen with pretty much taking them out of international markets, they were saying that while the bigger banks were also saying we're definitely buying them. But that's just a point that I wanted to transition from, that other people have had their hands involved in the Russian markets. And when it comes to in relation to these stock halts, it has a lot to do with our own one. So here's an article. It's from the Orlando Sentinel. It's an article that's been floating around, and let's see if I can see it without having to subscribe. I cannot, unfortunately, but that's okay because I'll be able to look it up this way. So let's go to Newsweek, and it's pretty much highlighting the fact that Florida's pension fund has 300 million invested in Russian stocks. If you are a part of Florida's pension fund or handling, you have a lot of questions to figure out as to what's about to happen to this $300 million. Because as I said, if you're an individual consumer or an individual investor, you most likely will not be getting your shares, aka meaning if you invested $1,000 into Russian stocks, high probability you just lost $1,000. You took that risk. For Florida, high probability they just lost $300 million. Maybe lower probability because they have more people being able to work on it, so they could kind of figure out a way to go about this. But there's still a probability that there's $300 million that just got squandered somehow. Now, if you're saying, if you're an individual investor and you have Russian stocks and you're wondering, what can I do about this, that I just lost $1,000? I would definitely say speak to accountant. I think there are ways for you to be able to write this off as a capital gains loss because of political events that happen outside of your control. I'm pretty sure there is a way to go about this, but I would speak with the financial advisor, speak with an accountant. I wouldn't all of a sudden deem that you just lost that money and there's going to be no way to kind of salvage something. For Florida's case, there's going to be a couple options that they're going to be able to either write it all off somehow. I don't think it's the case. I think they are going to be able to hire some smart people to figure out how to get their restitution or whatever. But that's just one example in that we've had interesting developments come out of people kind of splurging in these markets, being involved in them. Not only was Florida, but prior to that, Kentucky themselves, I remember seeing that Kentucky's teachers union or Kentucky pensions, whatever, had Russian stocks as well. Now they're saying they lost $3 million because they sold their shares during the drop off. But it's still interesting what's going on with these states. Why were they involved in international stocks, in particular Russian stocks in the first place? And what does it really portray when you have our politicians condemning Russia, you have a lot of people condemning the nation as well, all while those same people, there's a chance that they're receiving retirement returns and retirement dividends from companies that have partaken in Russia and their actions. Definitely a question to ask yourself. In relation to the market, in relation to Russian stocks themselves, how bad have they gotten smacked? Well, we can see, if you're wondering how is it that Kentucky was able to sell, I guess is a better question. About February 24th was when that invasion happened and when it hit the markets. After February 24th, there were bans in place, but in terms of brokerages, nothing was really done until March 4th. As you can see, you have the data completely stopped. This is for the RSX. This is the same for Lukoil, for Gazprom, and all that, all the big ones, Sberbank as well. The data stopped compiling on March 4th. I forget the exact date, but there was definitely a window in that 1 or 2 days for sure that you were able to sell your shares. I believe that's what the corporation, or that's what the pension fund did. But to kind of wrap up, Putin is now saying that if you have international shares, OTC shares for you in America, we're done with that. Those OT shares are no longer going to be happening. The only way you own Russian stocks is if you have an account with a broker that is directly involved with the Russian exchange, the MOEX. If you don't, most likely you've lost your shares and you're going to have to figure out a way to represent it on your taxes with most likely a capital gains deduction of sorts. Either way, definitely talk to your financial advisor. What has it showed us? Well, we kind of saw that a lot of American institutions in particular were already involved in Russian stocks. Especially interesting when we were condemning Russia in 2014 as well, but there was still a lot of investment being done to their companies. So it's definitely a lot of questions to partake out as to what's up with our investments. Our politicians and our leaders are telling us that we've heard many throughout the years in particular, especially with elections, that Russia's a bad place, that they're meddling, they're doing this, and yet we still had a lot of money going to them. So it's definitely interesting. What does it mean for you, the consumer? Obviously, the first thing is if you're interested in buying, you can't anyway right now because brokerages have forbidden it due to sanctions. Now should be aware of the risks that even if you do buy, if all of a sudden sanctions are somehow lifted, that you can purchase and sell these Russian securities, there's going to be things you have to take into account, not just from the American side, but from the international side, what the specific country that you're purchasing the shares from, what they're interested in doing, and what their policies are now. If you're someone who has shares, you can't liquidate them, and you're worried about this, it's definitely a situation to call up your accountant, call up your financial advisor, see, are you going to lose the shares? Are you going to be able to deduct the money you pretty much lost? If it's a big position, what does that mean for you? But it's definitely a lot of questions, and it's interesting because, as you saw, Russia said, we recognize there's a lot of international money involved in our markets. We don't, in the countries that have been slandering us, that have been attacking us in the public, they're invested it. So from now on, we're not interested in having those international investors partake in our markets if the nation they're from is going to continually badmouth us, so to say. I'm not saying anything's wrong or right here. I'm just saying the viewpoint. This sets a really interesting precedent, because what happens when other nations are like, we want to do the same, that we're tired of America or we're tired of Canada or whoever slandering us, from now on you can't invest in our companies. And the reverse, what happens if they say nobody in our country can invest in international markets? Which is interesting, because there, you know that there's a lot of international players, aka Asia, a lot of countries in Asia, a lot of countries in South America as well, India in particular too, that they have a lot of money tied up into American securities. So if all of a sudden those countries put in decrees that Americans can't buy their securities, or, let's say China says no more investment into American companies because we're tired of America, that's going to be an interesting situation. There's going to be a lot of money leaving the system, a lot of money being left, a lot of money being sold. And when you have selling, you have moves like these, and it definitely causes a lot of panic. So I think they're setting up for some interesting precedents, but that's pretty much all I got today. I'll be back this week. We're not doing videos every single day, but I'll be trying to put out some videos maybe a couple times a week when I see interesting headlines. It'll definitely be a lot of inflation coming up. I'll try to explain a lot of things, breaking down a lot of headlines. But that's all for today, folks. If you have any questions, got any comments, feel free to leave them down below. I'll leave my Twitter handle as well, and catch you all later this week. Enjoy.